Welcome to the Moments That Matter podcast. I am your host, Laura Escamilla.
And I am your co-host, Isaac Escamilla.
And I'm excited today to have Roman Silva and Felipe Olivarez from UTRGV Financial Aid Office back with us. This is your third visit with us, gentlemen. Thank you for being back.
Welcome back.
So financial aid is ever evolving and necessary. So thank you for joining us for another season to catch up with financial aid. Let's catch up with how did 24-25 end? We're still in it, but we're starting the new cycle soon. So we're at the end of it. How did that go?
It was an adventure, first and foremost. There were a lot of things that we learned. And I think as a team, we evolved and coped with it as best as we could. Honestly, the team did a tremendous job in staying updated, assisting students, and honestly making students feel more comfortable and understanding of the process itself, understanding that while it is a new form, it is designed to make things a little bit easier, and we just have to go through the hiccups to get through that. But overall, I think we managed it really well. I think UTRGV managed it really well. Our financial aid team managed it really well. And we were able to reach most of our goals. We awarded students in April, which was something that we really strived to do. We worked really hard to do. And I think we were one of the first, I would say, at least in our area.
Nice. Now for some perspective, like UTRGV, the amount of students that qualify or that utilize the financial aid, what's the percentage of that for the student body? Like how many people?
I don't have the exact percentage. I know it's a significant number of students that use it.
Is it most? Would you say it's most?
I would say it's most students for sure.
They would have to come through your office in some capacity, right? It's most students, including myself back when I was there.
I like to say that we're the favorite office for every student at UTRGV.
The necessary office for sure. Would you all say, I know I read a lot of reports about a decreased enrollment due to not having that financial aid, because that's a hard decision to make for parents and students, where to go to school when you don't know what that financial picture looks like.
Right.
Would you say that affected, did you all have less applications completed compared to years past, or enrollment changed or anything like that?
Honestly, the impacts for 24-25 were not as significant. I think a lot of that was a result of our team providing workshops for parents, for students, providing support. So we actually did not see significant impact at all.
That's great.
Which is really positive. I know there are reports for other institutions.
Well, nationally, I think it was down. Enrollment was down. Financial aid was down.
Right.
But again, we worked together as a team to provide as much support as possible. Like we had workshops almost every week. We were attending orientations to address questions for parents, just to help ease their nerves, I guess you could say, make them feel a little bit more comfortable with the process, or to walk them through it. A lot of times parents maybe didn't understand a question. They didn't know if they were a contributor or not. They didn't know what information to provide. How do I answer this? How do I answer that? So we were definitely there to support them as best we could.
A lot of guidance this time around.
A lot more guidance than we normally have done in the past.
We did, like, as far as our application cycle, we saw a decrease in completed applications. Like the application numbers for people starting applications were there, but the completion, that FAFSA, was not there. They were missing a majority of the ones that were incomplete were missing that FAFSA document, which is, I was curious, like how that translated to other aspects, right?
Definitely students had that issue where they would start it, they couldn't finish it. And that's where we had that issue where we were trying to support them with the workshops. So once they got to our workshops, we were celebrating with students because they were able to complete. They were thanking us. We've been trying to do this for 2 or 3 weeks. We couldn't do it. You guys helped. So we got to experience a lot of that, celebrating a lot of wins with parents and students. So I want to say that our team did a really good job in providing that additional support, obviously putting in the extra effort because we did have to work a little bit later than we usually do. But again, definitely, I wanted to just give out a huge kudos to our team because they did a great job.
Yeah, and it must feel great to know that you've made such an impact, helping them get over that.
Definitely seeing them happy and celebrating, it's honestly a big win for us.
It's great.
And what did that kind of look like for you? I mean, you said you're helping. Was it about more the parents not understanding their role, or issues with FAFSA in general, just the system itself? I mean, what did we learn from last year, right? There was, I think, a lot of hiccups, a lot of issues with the system itself, but also with, like you said, parents understanding what their part was in it.
Right, definitely. And I think there's more things that I could probably elaborate on, but commonly it was just parents didn't know how to answer a question, or perhaps they were answering it incorrectly, typing in their name incorrect, typing in their email incorrect, or just not being able to recover a password. Little things like that were common, at least what we saw. So we were able to help them relatively quickly in resolving those little issues. There were some that were a little bit more challenging. I know parents without a social struggled for a while, but we were able to help them navigate that process.
Figure it out.
Department of Ed provided some workarounds that we stayed updated as best we could so we can assist them. We did the best we could with what we had.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think that was our goal, and
Right.
most students were able to complete it without really too much effort on our part other than providing the workshops and the guidance. There was other students that where we did have to work with them a little bit longer, but we were able to get things
Yeah,
completed at least at that point.
like we had discussed last time we met, all the new rules of who does what was very tricky. I don't think there was a clear line to do anything. In my experience, I didn't have a lot of trouble, but we don't have any unique situation. Married, family of four, just do
Right.
normal. But unfortunately, that's not the norm anymore. There's a lot of
Lots of
married
variables.
divorces
Mhm.
and or separations and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that we got through it. Everybody survived. And now we're on to 25, 26. What changes can we expect now? I know that there was a rollout. Some families were selected to try the application to see if it worked and everything happening. What does that look like?
So for 25, 26, the positive is that not much was going to change. So they're
Mhm.
going to keep the form and everything, for the most part, relatively the same. Their focus is going to be on making the experience a little bit easier for students and families. That's going to be the main focus. So I'm glad you did mention that. The FAFSA is going to be made available in December, first of all.
Okay.
Obviously, again, it's different from what we traditionally know of October. Now we're going
October.
back to December. In the meantime, they are releasing out the FAFSA beta, which is basically going to be to try to identify any issues that may come up. That way they can perfect it. So that way by December, it would be hopefully
Okay.
to go.
Ready to
Yeah,
go.
definitely. What was the most common problem that you guys experienced across the board that it was something very consistent? Was there anything that was consistent? This is the greatest misunderstanding on the form, or was it mostly just human error? I can't get to my email anymore or something like that.
I think it's a combination of a few things. I don't want to say there was something that was common because
Okay.
every time we thought, this is a common situation, it's going to be the same for everybody, we would get surprised with something different. A lot of times the system could be at times picky as to how it wants you to write an address down, how it wants you to put a parent name down. So we saw that pretty consistently. We were able to help navigate that as well. But for the most part, it was mostly just how does the system want us to enter this data? That
Right.
way we can enter it correctly, the way it will be accepted.
That's good to know.
That was basically
And for
kind of
you
one of
all,
our,
that's probably trial and error. This worked with this person. And
it
this
may not work
family.
with this person. And then we'll
Right.
go back. But a lot of times what we would do, and it was mostly with students that had already submitted a FAFSA maybe for 23, 24.
Okay.
We would go back to their 23, 24 FAFSA. How did you type your name back then? And then we would look at it. Okay, let's type it exactly like that. And now let's send the invite and it would work.
So
a
that's
lot
what
of
it
times-
wanted. It wanted something familiar, something it already knew.
Mhm.
I understand.
Yeah. A
So
lot of
are-
times that was it.
Are there any new features or anything? You mentioned there's no changes to the application itself, but anything to make this process easier? Any changes happening?
As far as I'm aware, they have not announced any major changes to it.
Mhm.
They've announced that the form will be the same as the 24, 25.
So now you know how to fix everything. So what I wanted to do was walk through for parents who aren't familiar with FAFSA. I know schools are starting. I was just at a high school this morning doing a presentation. Now they're trying to get their students prepared to start applying for FAFSA. And of course, it doesn't open until December, but are the students able right now to go set up their IDs and start that process? Is that the first step?
Yes, definitely. That's the first step. Create your FSA ID. Also identify who your contributors are going to be. Like we mentioned, usually it's mom and dad, but now the circumstances may be different for different families. So it may be your step parent. It may be only your dad and its step parent. It just depends on the situation, right? The circumstances, but identifying who those contributors are and helping them create their FSA IDs. Obviously, they want to have an email, a unique email. So if you don't have an email address, create one. Obviously, they're free.
Mhm.
That would be the first step. And that would go a long way if you do that now. That way, when December comes,
You have it
you have it, you're
established.
good to go.
So
Good tip.
let's explain to those who don't know anything about it. High school senior, first child going to college. What does FAFSA do? What is the purpose of FAFSA?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and take that question.
It's
So the
nice to hear from you.
I know.
I feel like I was talking too much.
No.
No, and honestly though, when it came to the issues with the FAFSA that we
Mhm.
faced, Roman helping host those workshops, he was basically, him and his team were in the trenches. They were the
Right.
ones that were getting the questions, and then whenever Department of Ed would basically respond, hey, this issue might be coming up with certain students, then them with the technical team, they were the ones that would basically start to identify students that might be affected by this. and reaching out to them and trying to basically figure things out.
Superstar.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
The code helps because they'll listen.
Yeah,
They believe
all
you.
you need is a blazer and a badge,
There you
right?
go. Position of
True.
authority.
So let's
Yeah.
discuss, Felipe, what we can explain about FAFSA, what it does, what its purpose is for parents.
Okay, so the purpose of the FAFSA is to just basically identify what types of financial assistance a student is going to qualify for. When a student submits the FAFSA, the type of financial aid they might be eligible for might be federal funded grants, state funded grants, programs like work study, and then even student loans. In a nutshell, it's basically just the type of assistance that the student will be eligible for.
And what happens when the school gets it? So what is the importance of it? They start with FAFSA, then the student enters all the schools that they plan to attend, right? The list of schools. It gets sent to the schools, and then what does the school do?
So when every university basically receives a FAFSA, the first thing we're going to ultimately do is try to award the student. If the student's not selected for verification, there's no other additional documentation they need to bring in. Ultimately, the school's goal is to award the student the financial aid they're eligible for. Things like federal Pell Grant, if the student is eligible, that's going to be the same across the board. Regardless of whatever school the student decides to choose, federal Pell Grant is going to remain the same. The other institutional aid, the state aid, that's where things can differ. So when it comes to some institutional aid, like at UTRGV, some funding can be limited, so that's where students benefit from applying as early as possible. That's why we always stress, as soon as it becomes available, submit the FAFSA. Try to do it before the priority deadline.
So some aspects of the funding are first come,
Right.
first serve.
Some of them are first come, first serve. So the university, again, will first award any federal aid, any state aid, institutional aid, and then other things like student loans.
So you mentioned verification. What would get somebody, and that's the FAFSA side, that's the Department of Ed that would flag them that they need some sort of additional documentation or a unique situation that you would require additional, that the university would ask them for any documents, or how does that work?
With the new FAFSA simplification, and if the parents or even if the student themselves submitted an IRS, if they filed their taxes from 2 years prior, that information is supposed to automatically transfer over as soon as they provide their consent. In a situation where if the student or the parent are unable to transfer that information, or if they don't provide consent and they manually enter that information, that's where they might get selected for verification, because the Department of Education might want us or the university to verify that the information they provided is correct.
Okay, so what happens when a parent chooses not to enter their information for a student? On the student side, there's two aspects. The student enters their information and the parent enters information, and the student sends that invitation to whoever, mom or dad, guardian, to enter. What happens if the parent doesn't do it?
So the parent does not provide the information if the student is classified as a dependent student, meaning they have to provide the parent's information. If the parent refuses, unfortunately, it's going to hurt the student. The student will not qualify for programs like Pell Grant or possibly any other institutional aid, and their only option would be an unsubsidized student loan.
So what happens when the parent, they do fill out FAFSA and, for example, loans, and the parent is they're on their own and they contact you, because I see this often. So, well, we're not going to help them after they go to college. Like, they're not dependent, they're independent. Can't they get a loan on their own? Can they get these things on their own? We're not going to help them. What does that look like on your end? I'm sure you get those calls. I'm sure you get parents that are like, or kids saying, my parents don't want to help me.
Yes, no, unfortunately, we do get that quite a bit. So after the student has submitted the FAFSA, we award them. If and when we offer them student loans, if the parent basically ultimately says, I'm not going to provide any other additional assistance, then the student might only have that initial option as far as that maybe subsidized, unsubsidized loans. The student is still basically falling short of covering full tuition fees, dormitories, or any other expenses. That's where now it's left on the student. How are they going to cover that? And if their parents are refusing, if the parents do not want to take out a Parent Plus loan on for the student's
give them
education,
money out of their pocket,
or give them
right?
out of pocket, then it's basically going to leave the student in a hard place.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I really want to convey to parents, because as I do presentations for parents and families, that is the most common thing. I figured it out, they can figure it out. And that's
Mhm.
just not the state of things right now. I really want to impress on parents that they need to help their child. They need to fill out FAFSA for one. And obviously, that's a conversation for their families to have if they want to. You can't force a parent to take out a loan for them or give them money out of their pocket, but the child should know ahead of time what that looks like so they're not caught, already admitted to school, already waiting for their financial aid and figuring out, I'm not going to get this money. So, do you have any advice for parents or students in this situation, or how do we get this across? Because I feel like it's a big issue, at least that I see with parents. Like, we don't want to do this. We're not going to help.
I see it too. I hear from people that tell me the same thing. Like, I did it on my own. They can do it on their own. But the reality is that they cannot.
And I think a lot of times parents think that, oh, if we don't provide the information, maybe it'll help them.
Mhm.
But it actually does the exact opposite. So there is a question on the FAFSA that does ask if parents are refusing to provide information and they're only going to be eligible for the unsubsidized loans. In the rare situation where that is the case, the student can indicate that the parent is refusing and they would be eligible for only unsubsidized loans up to the loan limits, like Phil did mention. But what we've seen a little bit is that some students will actually just answer that question saying, my parents are refusing to provide information because they don't want the parents to provide any information. And that puts them in a
They
really,
think it'll be helpful to
right,
them.
they think it'll be helpful perhaps, but it puts them in a very difficult spot because at that point, there's some information that we do need to get from the students. And when they find out that they're only going to get unsubsidized loan, which is usually is not enough to cover
Mhm.
tuition fees if they're living in dorms, things like that,
Right.
and they get into a difficult spot basically.
Definitely.
I didn't even think about the student selecting that on their own.
And they
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
and then it usually ends up becoming was a mistake, and now we have to
Go
provide fix it, and that causes another delay.
Right.
For
Is it
students
now?
completing the
I guess my
FAFSA.
follow up question: is it fixable? Can you fix that in time if the student inadvertently puts? Okay,
Yes,
great.
definitely fixable.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's just when you're talking about first come, first serve funding,
Right.
you're now affecting what
Right,
that
because
looks
there'll be
like,
less
right?
funding available by
Right.
the time that
Because
comes around.
they're delaying their
Right.
process.
Right. Okay.
Definitely.
So I think imposing that families should have this discussion before they start filling out FAFSA on who's doing what, right?
Right.
And who can do what. What are the key documents? So I also know that a big obstacle or hesitance of parents to fill it out is the IRS data retrieval, where it's pulling your income tax, because that is the main component of establishing an SAI number, which is the student aid index. That's what you use, the universities, and what we use as the scholarship organization to determine that financial need. So can you talk to me about what that data retrieval looks like? What is it really? Because I always tell parents when they ask me, like, I don't want the IRS pulling my data. I don't want that. I'm like, they already have it. It's all the same. It's the government. They already have the information. You're essentially
It's true.
just, going from one department to the other, right? Like, it's the same thing. They already have it. You just need to consent for it to be pulled. It's already there. So when you're saying people enter their income tax or information manually, like, they're making it harder on themselves.
Yeah, especially if they decide, you know what, if I can just try to fudge these numbers, maybe it'll change things. It is going to end up making things a little bit more difficult. And in the end, all they're doing is just delaying the student's financial aid packaging. Because if they enter the information manually, they're selected for verification. Now we need to have the student provide proof of the
You're
tax.
still asking for their tax documents.
We're still asking for that IRS tax transcript. Every university's financial aid verification department is ultimately going to request that information. Once they see it doesn't match, they'll make the correction, and now they're back to where they would have been.
Yeah.
at
And
the
I
beginning.
did feel as a parent that portion was easier, because I think all the FAFSA has always pulled that data from the IRS and all the applications that it's allowed you the option to do that. And I've always selected that option. But there was still another little aspect where you still had to manually enter and match what it said. What is this adjusted gross income, say on your W-9? You still had to manually enter some information. And this new application doesn't do that. I think it just takes what it has. You don't have to figure it out. When you're talking about preparing to fill out FAFSA, I didn't have to go pull, because that was part of the old system. I had to go pull my taxes so that I could
Mhm.
fill out certain information still. And that's not necessary now.
So I think what you're talking about is the data retrieval. So that was actually retired.
Yeah.
I wish- As we know, it was a little bit challenging sometimes. For some people, it would work. For some, it wouldn't work for some.
Good
It would,
riddance.
it would never work for me,
Yeah.
just on my side. So I had to manually enter everything.
Yeah.
So now it was changed. And that's why parents do have to provide consent and approval because we are taking tax information directly. So that would be a lot easier for most families to do. Obviously, the student will not see it because I know some parents, maybe that's a concern as well. Student doesn't see that. The student won't even see the parent's side of the application. A lot of ways to safeguard the information. It's a lot more secure. So parents should rest easy, at least in that part of things, feel more comfortable in doing so. And if they did not file, they still need to provide consent.
So that they can go check that they didn't file.
Tax
Right.
filing status is still tax information.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if you didn't file.
Yep, you still have to do it.
And I read somewhere, or I'm not sure if it was a workshop or not, but if they do not consent, then they're automatically
It gets
pushed,
rejected.
rejected, and they're pushed to, I guess, now on the school side, you all have to do something to help them figure it out.
Yeah, we have to get them to
Accept it, to
consent,
consent.
yeah.
Bottom line is make everybody's life easier, parents, and just consent to
Right.
getting it.
Inevitably, it sounds like the process is just delayed, detrimental to the students.
What
Usually.
would you say to parents who don't want to fill out FAFSA, or students who don't because they don't think they qualify or for any aid? They've made assumptions of what that looks like. What would you tell them?
I would probably tell them that a common misconception is that the FAFSA is only referencing the Pell Grant
Mhm.
or gift aid for what most people think, which is money you don't have to pay back.
Correct.
But in completing the FAFSA, it also opens the opportunity for federal direct loans. So you do need to do your FAFSA if you want to get a federal direct loan. There's state institutional aid, there's different programs like that. Even scholarships sometimes use the financial aid information or the FAFSA information to determine whether a student will be eligible for a specific scholarship. So I would always say there's nothing to lose when you do your FAFSA. There's
Right.
more to gain. Nothing negative will happen with completing one.
So I've always functioned with it's better to have it and not need it, right, than to need it and not have it, because like you said, you were pointing out, if you delay the process, you're just making it harder on yourself. And if there ever is a situation where the parent does have to take out a Parent Plus loan, you don't think you are, but you get to the end numbers and you do have to, if you don't have anything there, you're making everybody's life a little more difficult, right? Like
Causing a really big delay.
and can we talk to parents about to prepare for it? So it's a really easy process now, right? So they're essentially going to need their email, a working email. When they're preparing, they're going to have to set up that ID. But once they get in, are there anything they have to be prepared with in the process?
I always recommend to have their tax information handy. You never know if you do need it. But the most important thing is to create your FSA ID. So having that unique email, every contributor and the student has to have a unique email. They can't share one. So it's important that they all have their individual ones. Obviously, if they've already created an FSA ID, knowing the password is very helpful. A lot of times parents will come in, I forgot my password, and that causes a little bit of a delay because it does take some work to get that password reset sometimes. That's the first thing. Obviously, have that information, have your tax information. I think those are two of the important things to have. Also, understanding your circumstances, right? Every student does have unique circumstances, knowing what you're going to be answering to certain questions. Specifically, we talked a little bit about the parent refusal, but there's also a question regarding homelessness. There's a question regarding any unique circumstances like orphan or legal guardianship. Understanding those little questions, it would be very helpful beforehand. And if you don't know the answer to it, asking us at the office and we can guide what information you'll need. Because if you do indicate something like that, we will obviously need to verify that information as well.
I also have seen on some of the groups that I follow, one of the questions like, my ex-husband makes more money than I do, and he's refusing to fill out FAFSA. And the student lives with the parent that makes the lesser of the income. How does that affect the student? Who fills out the FAFSA? In the case where parents are divorced, the parent that they live with makes less than the parent they don't. I guess I would imagine they're providing some child support or what have you. Who fills out? Do they both fill out the FAFSA?
So that's a challenging question only because it would really depend on each family's unique situation, right? So the person that would fill it out would be the parent that provides the most financially for the student. So it may not necessarily be the parent
one
that
they
makes
live
the
with,
most, or it may not be the one that they live with. It really just depends on who provides the most financially for the student. So that would be something where they would have to sit down and
So what
make
if
the
the
determination.
parent who let's say the ex-husband makes the most money and provides a good amount of child support, so they technically provide the most financial support, and they don't want to do it. What is the recourse for the child?
In those rare circumstances, I would say that the student needs to have a good conversation with mom or dad, whoever it may be, and basically express the situation. Now, if the parent is flat out refusing, they do not want to do it,
That's where they enter
then that's where they'll enter the parent refusal.
they wouldn't enter the other parent's information.
No.
They would have to say the parent who has the most financial gain.
The one that supports them the most financially.
They wouldn't be like, now my other parent's going to fill it out. They would have to say, nope, the parent is not helping. And I was just showing Isaac this yesterday that somebody, a group I follow on Facebook, was posting this long thing like, my ex-husband doesn't want to and he makes more than me and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. And usually in those situations, both parents come and we've talked to them and explained to them the process. And usually, more often than not, we can get
the parents
them to support their child.
That's good news.
If a student is in this situation and listening to this and their parents don't want to help, maybe setting up an appointment with their school financial aid office to walk through what this looks like would be the best.
And we
course.
can always guide them and assist them. A lot of times it's just a misunderstanding of what's being asked.
Sure.
And that's usually the reason why there's, a little bit of difficulty. Yeah. So we can help them navigate that. Not an issue at all. And I'm sure the high schools have support as well for situations.
And in that same vein, if a parent filling out FAFSA does not obligate them to take out a loan for their child, does not obligate them to give money to their child.
Right.
All it is saying is you're going to figure out what my child qualifies for.
Correct.
And if they get offered loans, the child doesn't have to take them.
Correct.
It's doing is providing a financial picture. I think that's important also that parents know that just because they're filling out FAFSA doesn't make them the hook for anything.
Correct. It does not.
They're not going to get the bill for school automatically because they filled out FAFSA.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah. Ultimately, the bill is still going to be on the student side.
Yeah. So they're going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about deadlines. Okay. So we're opening December 1st. What does that look like as far as they can fill out FAFSA until the following year, I think, right? It just means the funding is not there. It may not be there if they post it too late. Is there, earlier you mentioned April, is that when this university hopes to notify students of their financial aid packages? Is that what that timeline looks like?
So our priority deadline is March 15th.
Okay.
That's what we were just notified.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So it is March 15th. So students are encouraged to complete it before that date.
Okay. Because I know we had a scholarship office a couple of weeks ago. So their deadline to apply for scholarships and be admitted is December 1st. And I guess that all kind of ties in there with those funds and what that looks like for the student. Okay. So December 1st, we start for 25-26. What if there is a student that right now did not get funding for the fall, but they need funding for the spring? Can they still apply for 24-25 right now?
Yes, definitely. They can still apply for 24-25
and get assistance doing that. Okay. Anything else we need to mention that we didn't get through?
No. I think obviously we provide support to students as best we can. So always encourage families to reach out to the university. Any university, I believe, will provide some type of assistance or guidance. So utilize the resources that you have. Most of them are free resources, so take advantage of them. And ask questions. We always like hearing questions, and we usually can answer most of them. Never hesitate to ask a question. There's no such thing as a wrong or dumb question. We're always there to help.
Will UTRGV start doing workshops or things as soon when FAFSA opens? Is that what that looks like for students to come in? Or
so I think we're still having a lot of conversations right now. Our focus is still on 24-25. We're still trying. We're still trying to
it's not
help
over
students.
yet.
Yeah, it's not over for some students. So we're definitely still trying to assist them, and we are doing some workshops for students that need help with 24-25, and we'll probably explore what 25 and 26 will look like at a later time.
Great. That's good news.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here again. I'm going to keep asking you back because this always changes and the more information parents have, the better and understanding it. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.